Hello and welcome everyone to our Saturday stream for Fantasy Grounds Unity. I'm Josh and this is our map and image creation. So thanks everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate it. We're going to be delving into some regional map creation today, which should be super fun. Last week we did finish up the haunted cabin, which we had started for around Halloween, and I think that came out pretty good. So we're going to move on to our next one, call this one Complete. As always, if there's anything that you guys have any questions about, or if there's something that maybe that you've been trying to create and you've struggled with, or bugs or whatever it might have been, please let me know. I'm more than happy to try to experiment and figure out some ways to do stuff, or explain how the system works and everything along that way. You're welcome, Drake. Yeah, no problem. That's why I'm here. So here we're going to be getting into a couple of different ways of creating some maps, and one of the things that I always kind of stress is that the system is very robust. There's many different ways to approach every kind of scenario, so there's no one right or wrong way to kind of use the image creation system. It's very, very diverse. So let's just open up our images over here. And I'm not even going to open up my assets yet because I'm going to show you guys. I know that like in a lot of like the old gaming systems and whatnot, like early TSR games, there was the maps were always very, very simple. And so all of that is completely achievable within Fantasy Grounds without ever needing to use or right, Spencer? Any of the images for the image creation system, there's a completely built-in just color-based kind of painting system, and all of that can be used extremely easily and effectively to create anything that you actually need. In addition to that, with the new export functionality, you can literally kind of create anything right inside of Fantasy Grounds and then use that as your own individual images. So never think that there is any one way to kind of approach this. So I'm just going to create a new image record, and we're just going to make this a little bit larger. I'm going to go into my grid system and I'm just going to make it 100 by 100. And the reason why I always switch it to 100 by 100 is just because the math makes it easy, right? A lot of the times when I do my image creation, rather than using like 50 by 50 or something along those lines where you have a little bit more of inconvenience and trying to think about like the distance between something. If something is 100 pixels across, then I know it's going to be 1 square and so on. And then you can always adjust this internally. You can always change the way that these images interact with the grid system, but that's just a really simple way that I kind of approach it, and that's why I always kind of do this at 100 by 100 when we start off here. I'm going to go to my color picker, and you'll notice that we always have a color picker, or most always, in association with our different tools, and in that is our RGB as well as our alpha channel, so we can just lower down the opacity of that grid, and so we can still kind of have it here, but it's not going to be so intrusive, right? We can still kind of use this. And then we can go into our painting mode over here, and I'm just going to add a painting layer. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my stroke, and you can use stroke to do lots of different stuff with it. But for right now, I'm just going to turn that off. I'm going to switch over to my fill element, and I'm going to make that a color fill. So you can see here we have two different elements here. We have an image and we have color. And in addition to that, we have our color picker, which is associated with this. We have a whole bunch of different other kind of tool elements over here that we can adjust, but we're going to keep it just as it is for right now. And with our new painting layer selected, I can just go into my color picker, and there's a couple of different ways we're going to do this, right? So what are the two main elements that we have when we're creating a regional map, right? We have ground and we have water, and that's the major differences in what we're going to create, right? So whenever we're doing a regional map, just think about it in two different ways. We have ground and we have water. Now, depending on how much of that is going to be in our maps, right? Depending on the scale that we're doing it, maybe we're doing a regional map that's like the interior of a continent, and we're just going to have like streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, and so on. We might not have too much of a coastline, so then it's going to be predominantly our ground layer. And that would be the layer that I put down first, right? Whatever is going to be the most amount of area kind of filled up. And if it's going to be about half and half, right? So if we're going to do like an island continent, something like Australia or something along those lines, where we're going to have like water all the way around it, as well as some interior stuff, then it doesn't really matter, right? Whichever we're going to use, we can kind of just do it that way. But in this context, I think that it's going to be easiest if we put down our water first. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a color that's going to be in that same general vicinity. And we can adjust this later. And this is one of the great things about the fill system, is that we can go into our edit fill layer and we can just adjust that. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. And I'm going to hold down Control. And because I don't have grid snap turned on, Control will allow me to snap to the grid. If I have this turned on, Control will stop it from snapping to the grid. So you should always be aware of that. So I'm going to hold down Control up. I'll hit Control Z there, and I'm going to make sure I have my rectangle selected. And I'm just going to pull out here this blue field, right? And maybe this is a little bit too bright, so we can come over into here and we can lower down some of that blue, and we can make the whole thing darker if we want, and so on. We can make it lighter. So something like that would work pretty well. Great. And now all I have to do is I'm going to create a new painting layer for my land elements. And again, we can go back over here, except this time I do want my line selected. And I'm going to go back to my color picker. And maybe we're going to do something like let's do a little bit more of a brown, something like this. And again, we can go back in and we can do those color adjustments after the fact. We can add in other colors to it. We show you guys how you can kind of do that. And by using the fill system here, and we're going to switch over in a moment and use actual images and kind of make like a really cool regional map. But for right now, all of these basic concepts can always be used. And it's always important to understand them from these kind of areas. And so if you do not have the art subscription, you do not have any art packs, that's fine. You still can use the entire system, and you can pretty much build whatever you need. So let's go in here, and we're just going to start drawing out a shape. And without holding Control, I'm just going to start dragging my mouse around here, right? And so we'll some ins and outs here. And here we have a nice kind of land mass that we can begin to manipulate. So as we come back in here now, we can grab some of these and begin to move them around. We can change some of this, pull it in if we wanted to. We might not want to have such angular elements. So we might, spend some time manipulating the stuff around into whatever shapes, whatever elements that we might want to. Now, the really cool thing about using this system is, let's go back over into our area over here, is we also have the add functionality and the subtraction functionality. And what this is going to do, right, is allow us to add elements to this. So if I go into my add functionality, again, I could pull out some additional kind of areas, right? So maybe I want to pull this down and do something along these lines. I can certainly do that. We can add this out over here, and I can do exactly the same thing with the subtract functionality. So what I can actually do is begin to carve away elements that I don't want, and then I can add back in elements that I might want, right? And there's a little bit of a bug that's going on right now with these as you adjust the zoom in and out, but that should get fixed. If you use your middle mouse wheel, they'll go away instantly. So if that starts to cause any sort of problem for you. But we can also use our eraser. And what our eraser is great is it's going to maintain a particular type of width as we begin to work through these. And we can control that width by holding control and our mouse wheel here. So I can make this smaller, and I can begin to chop up some of these elements down like through here. And this is much like the functionality of subtraction, right? And so you can see here, we can come in and we can create little tiny elements, build all of these things back and forth, and really begin to play with the shapes that we have here. Now, the cool thing about doing it this way is, let's say I make this a little bit larger and I decide, oh, I'm going to do a river. So here I'm going to start to pull in something like this, and then I can make it a little bit smaller. And maybe we're going to start to meander it in through here, and I can make it a little bit smaller. And then I can make it a little bit smaller. And you can see how easily you can start to change all of these things, right? And we can even get in here and start to do lots of little elements. And we can do little offshoots and just kind of go wild. And the great thing about this is, in addition to this, what we can actually do is always come back in, and we can manipulate these. So maybe we want the mouth of the river to be a little bit more rounded to something like this. We can do that. We can even come in here, make these kind of come into a little bit more of like an angular end to something like that. We might do the same thing over here, or we might even want to just delete these and bring this to something like that. And then again, we can go back into our painting mode, and you can see how much that you can kind of manipulate this system in creating anything that you want to. Now, another really great way that we can kind of do this is, let's go into it. We have our little image creation over here. This is where we made our temple, our idol for that haunted area. Excuse me while I have a sip of coffee. Now let's just delete all of this stuff. And I can, here's one of the really cool things that we can kind of do here. Let's turn the stroke off and switch over to our color fill. I can use this to grab this color, right? So it's going to be exactly the same as the color that I have over there. And in here, let's say I want to create, well, let's say we're just going to do, maybe something like this, and like a couple of little islands, perhaps. So here I have created like a little element over here. Let's say, because this is also at 100 by 100, so maybe this is a little bit too large for me. I can hold down Shift, and I can shrink this down to maybe something along these lines, as you can see here, right? And now what I can do is we can just go to our export. So maybe this is going to be like a little grouping of islands. And I will call this, you're not going to see the little pop-up that I get, but I get this pop-up, and it allows me to save this to anywhere on my system. And I can save it as a PNG or a WebP or a JPEG. And because I want to maintain the alpha channel, I should use a WebP or a PNG. And so a PNG is going to have a little bit bigger of a file size than your WebP image, but it also might have a little bit higher of a definition. So depending on what you want to do with it and how you're going to do it, that's going to help determine what you're going to use there. And so I'm just going to call this island. Let's spell it correctly, and I'm going to save that. And so you can see that this is going to kind of bring this a little bit larger into view. That's going to make sure that I know that it was saved correctly here. And now I can close this down. If I go into my assets now, so let's go to my assets, which are these ones. And I believe I saved it into here. And all I have to do is refresh this folder. And that's going to bring that right up to current. Whatever I've saved in there is going to become available to me immediately. And so what I can actually do is now go over into my stamp tool, something like this. And I'm just going to move this over. Let's shrink this down a little bit and move this over. And then I'm going to grab this, and I can grab it and drop it right in here. And you can see now I have this little element over here that is pre-made to this. And I can just start stamping this around in here, right? Should anyway. Let me just grab this, and we'll replace our haunted cabin. Let's try that one more time here. We'll go here. Let's see. Yeah, see, so it tried to do that, but let me just, sometimes if you run into a small bug, all you have to do is close down the image and reopen it. And so here we have it, and boom. And now I can change its size, and we can start to even overlap some of this stuff, right? So we can create some interesting kind of shapes here. Bring this down a lot smaller, and we can drop this like this. And so you can see, you can really spend some time and create these different elements that you're going to be using, and use them back and forth with all of the different parameters here, right? So we have total control over how that works. Now, we can do exactly the same things with images themselves too, right? And this is when this becomes super, super powerful. So what I'm actually going to do, as you can see here, you could totally control this. We could go back down into here, and I can control the RGB values of this. So if I wanted to make it lighter, there's lots of cool things that we can kind of do to create different functionalities here. One other thing that I want to show you before we go into the actual images thing is that we can go into our effects layer, and this is how we can do a lot of the manipulations of the terrain, like color-wise, without having to put a whole lot of effort into it. And so what we can actually do is go into our effects layer, and we have this create effects layer using painting as mask. So what it's going to do is it's going to pick up that entire fill layer that we've created over here, and it's going to use that as a mask for us for whatever we decide that we're going to create, right? So we're going to create a new effects layer, and we're going to go down to adjust colors. And let's say, for example, because this is our mask, let's make it a little bit more green, right? So right now there's a little bit of a bug. It's not going to really show up until you move the blur slider, as you can see here. And this can create some really cool elements here, like that. You know how in a lot of maps they have that fade out from the land, where the water and the land meet. So you can do something along those lines with this, right? And we can go in lots of different directions. So we could do the same thing if we went into the blue and so on. But we're gonna make this a little bit more green. But we're actually gonna do it like a little bit of a darker green, I think. So we'll do something like this. And then we can just up our brightness here a little bit. So it's gonna be a little bit more of a muted tone. And having it blurred out is exactly what I want anyway. And so you can see, even with these elements here, you get a nice fade out to where they kind of interact here. And so now what I can do is like go to hide area. And so anywhere where I want to make this back to its original color, I can just hold down Alt, and I can draw out any shapes I want to and start to bring this back into its original color. Now, the cool thing about this is I can do this multiple times. So what I can actually do, let's say I want to do some further adjustments into these areas. I can actually duplicate this layer, and it's going to duplicate the mask. So if I duplicate it, you can see, and now I can readjust some of these colors. So let's say we bring this down. We're going to do like some darker areas, right? And now what I can actually do is begin to remove some additional areas. We're going to want to make it a little bit more in line with what we have here. So let's bring it to more something like this. So we have a little bit more of a gradual transition, maybe. Yeah, something more like this. And you can see now we can do multiple kind of things here. And this is all just with the built-in functionality of Fantasy Grounds. There's no additional art packs being used. And so you can really get in here and start to make some really interesting and dynamic kind of elements without ever having to touch any of the art packs. Now, with that being said, let's remove all of these things and actually start to do this with some images. You can see how much that fidelity is going to be increased here. So let's delete all these. We'll create a new painting layer. And now what I'm going to do, and we're going to be using the image creation system as well, exporting and creating whatever shapes that we might need. And I'll show you guys how you can make basically whatever you want to. And I'm going to be using, I have created in the past, and if you guys ever need any other art packs, or if there's something that you think that we're missing in official content, just let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of dive into possibly creating any sort of art pack. So I'm always looking for ideas. I'm super excited for the one that's going to be coming out this month. I put together some really cool animated stuff that I'm really excited to kind of show off when it comes time. But without any sort of other elements here, let's go into our regional map packs. And so I have two, like this old world regional one, which is kind of along the lines of those Lord of the Ring-esque kind of maps. So that can be super fun to do. And then I have this one, which is a little bit more of a realistic textures for the ground and so on, and water and so on. And so in these, right, we have these tiles, which these are just tiles or stamps that you could kind of like place out and around. But with the modern system, it's less necessary because of the way that the system kind of works. Yeah. So these used to be like snap together and whatnot because we didn't have the same kind of functionality to put a lot of this together. So this would have been the water, and this would go over and overlay, and so the ground would kind of show through. And you could still make it that way, but I find it a lot easier if we just go into our backgrounds here, and you can see we have some like earthy backgrounds. Here's one for different kind of colors and whatnot, which are the same kind of elements that were used to create something like this. But now we can just kind of grab this and begin to paint out and around and do it all the way. Now we can do this exactly the same way as we did before. And I have some other water textures that we'll be using from a different art pack. And in here, we have brushes for like borders and doing all kinds of cool things like that. And in our decorations, we have like this base kind of texture. And this texture we can use to kind of build up our initial kind of ground layer as well. And then we have these kind of elements that can just be like stamped on and whatnot. And so we have lakes and so on. But I'm going to show you guys how we can kind of interact with the system. So these, even though they're still very viable and you can still use them, they're going to be a little bit more limiting than the way I'm going to show you guys the creation method that I like to use. So let's go in. So we can grab this base texture. Why don't we start off with this one? We'll go right into here. Again, I'm going to turn off. Yeah, let's turn off the stroke for this because I am going to use the stroke for the water, and I'm going to show you how that's going to kind of work there. And then I'm going to grab this and drop this right into our base texture here. And I'm going to go to my rectangle, holding down Control. I'm just going to pull this out like this. And you can see that this is, until we go over here, we're going to keep seeing that. But you can see here we have lots of different like texture elements, and that's great. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go over into this, and I'm going to change the scale of this. I'm going to use my the control key and my mouse wheel to zoom this up. I'm going to make this quite large. And I might even use shift and rotate it here a little bit. And we just want some variations in here. We're going to be building on top of it, but we do want a little bit of variations. And one of the great things about using your land as your base and then drawing your water over it is that we can just kind of like stamp some things around, and whatever water that we place over the top of it is just going to work, right? And we're going to be doing that with another different water texture as well. So the first thing that I'm going to kind of do here is I'm going to label this ground. And then we're going to create a new painting layer, and this is going to be our water. Now we might put some layers in between because it's always very useful. We can always rearrange our layer order and build things up much more dynamically, I guess is the word I'm trying to come up with there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up out of here, and I want to go to coasts. Let's see. I think it's this one. And we go into our backgrounds, and yes, here we have a nice water texture that I'm going to use for this as well. So now I'm going to go back into the painting tab over here, and I'm just going to grab this and drop this down here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a coastline along here, and I'm going to kind of swoop it this way, right? So I want it to kind of line up along these two edges. So I'm going to hold down Control as I start off here, and I'm just going to click, and then I'm going to drag down, and then I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to go to about there and click. And now, once I've clicked those edges, those are all lined up. Now I'm going to hold down my left mouse button and drag out my coastline over here. And we can do some ins and outs. And maybe do something along these lines. Now you can see here that what I did was I kind of built out the basic kind of shape here. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense with what texture we have going on here, but that's okay. We can easily fix that. But here we can do is we can come back in and we can use our edit area over here, and we can manipulate these things around. We can build whatever we want to. If we want to come in here and get as detailed as we wish, especially if we have like a pre-made kind of idea. We can also come back into here and we can use our add functionality or our subtract functionality. So subtraction could work really well for us to come out here and make some islands. We're just erasing away some of these bits here, right? We can zoom right in here and do some small stuff. Now, again, what we can do, and this is something that we can kind of always kind of manipulate here, is that we can create our own islands in our little image creation asset over here, right? So we can delete that anytime that we want to. We could build out some small little things that we can kind of stamp around in addition to that. But we have lots of different ways that we can kind of interact with all of these different systems here. And now let's say I want to go into my add functionality, and I'm going to come in here. Maybe I want to add in some different shapes along here. And you can see that's going to build that right in. You're not going to see the little bit of a bug is like the old one, but if I switch over here, you can see these are all of the new nodes by which that we can interact with the image shape. So same over here. Let's say I want to add in some additional, maybe this is going to come in a little bit longer, maybe even become like a the beginning of like a river or whatnot. Maybe I want to come in and make this a little bit rougher. And then on the same note, what we can do is we can also come in and just build things like straight across, right? So we can make our maybe we'll do like a little bit more like right there, and then we can switch back over into our subtraction mode, and we could and so we can add it back and forth and continue to manipulate our image until all of these things begin to make a lot more sense to us, right? Kind of get into lines of where we're going with that. Now, in this kind of context, oftentimes what I would do is I would go in and reduce the number of those that we're having there. But because we're kind of creating this regional map, we want to have a lot of flexibility. I would leave it exactly the way it is right now, right? It's not gonna really interfere with us very much. And I would probably export this all as an entire image. And so we don't have to worry about it too much. And now, because we have our ground and our water on two separate layers, I can now come back to the ground here, right? And now let's go over into our regional map once again. And we'll jump right into here. And I'm going to go into, we have effects as well, which is texture overlays and whatnot that we can use, as well as like a vignette. So we'll get into using all of this kind of stuff as well. But let's go back up into here. We're going to go into not our brushes, but our decorations. And here we have some nice little like sand elements and whatnot. So if we want to do like some beached areas, and we have some different kind of like textured overlays that we can use. We can add all of these things on top. And because we have done the water on top, we can more easily interact with the shape that we've created underneath, right? It's going to be a little bit harder for us to make rivers, but it's going to be much easier for us to interact with the elements underneath here. So now I'm going to switch over into my stamp mode, and let's grab like some of this here, something like this. And I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to drop it right here. And I'll make this a bit bigger. And I think we'll kind of come into something along these lines. We get this little bit of a fade here. Maybe we'll make it a little bit smaller so it's a little bit easier for us to kind of control here. And then I can stamp this in. Oh, again, we're going to have a little bit of a, let's try that one more time here. Grab this and drop this over here. And I'm just going to drop down here. I'm going to use this side of it, make it a little bit larger, something like this. And then you can see we can stamp this right in here like that. Now what I can do is I can start to lower down my opacity a little, and maybe a little bit more. Lower it down even more. And see, we can come in here. If this is sticking out a little bit, I can kind of move this in. It doesn't really bother me, but if it is always a viable option, make this a bit smaller here. Yeah, awesome. So we can start to build out some of these things. We can even come up here. Maybe we're going to have a little bit more of a beach up here. Very cool. Now what we can do is, let's say we want to do like maybe some darker areas along the coast here and whatnot, or rocks and so on. We can do exactly the same kind of thing. But we can do the same thing with this. Let's increase our opacity here, and maybe we're going to make it a bit darker, right? So maybe we're going to do something along these lines. And we have this nice little fade on the edge here. You'll lower down my opacity a little bit. But here we can kind of do the same thing here. right? We get some nice little elements that really gives us that kind of thought process that there is some sort of interaction between the land and the water. Very, very cool stuff. And we can even do stuff out here. So again, maybe we'll do a little bit of a sandy beach on this guy. And so we can kind of do this, and I'll lower down my opacity a bit and just kind of peek this out. Maybe a little bit on this one as well. And you can see we have all of this cool kind of texture out here that we can play with and interact with. So let's go, we'll grab some of these different kind of elements here. I think I'm going to grab like one of these, something like this, I think. And I'm just going to grab and drop this right over here. And again, here on my ground layer, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to start to stamp some of this stuff in and around. Make it a little bit smaller as well, lower down its opacity, and create some really cool stuff here. And again, I'm going to lower down my opacity a bit. And we can even flip it, so we can change it totally. And what I like to do is kind of build it up around some of this stuff. And as that opacity gets higher and higher, you can see we get some really nice, like natural kind of formations along here. We also have things along these lines, like these bits of rock and so on. And so I'm going to grab this. And now let's make like some cliffy areas along here, right? So what I'm actually going to do is, again, I'm going to just lower down my opacity here a bit. Let's lower it down even more. I'm going to kind of do this out so it's a little bit further. And then I'm going to increase the opacity. And then we're going to like rotate it around maybe a little bit. And then we can increase it even more. Change its size here a bit. Yeah, that's starting to look pretty good here. What we can do is, after the fact, is we'll come in here and we'll do like some waves and whatnot up on the water here itself. We can come in, let's do some like here. I'm going to lower this down a bit so it's kind of, right? So we get, like, look at these cool textures as they begin to overlap each other here. See, here we have the nice, and then we can add in some of this along the edges here. We might even want to grab something like this. To help fade some of this a little bit. And we'll go up and add a little bit of this and lower this down a bit. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And we can even take some of this stuff and maybe blend out some of these areas as well. Like in these inland areas, we can build some deserts if we want to. And if you guys have any sort of input or anything that you'd like to kind of see as we create here, please let me know. I grab this one, drop this guy in here, and we can maybe build some mountainous regions, you know, kind of from this area right in here. I'm just going to stamp this right in here, and then I'm going to make this guy a little bit smaller. And let's kind of build off of this a bit. Lower that down. See, what I do is I use these kind of like peak elements, and I build off of them with the peak elements that are already there by lowering down the opacity. So what I can actually do, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, we can flip it here, mountains from like a topographical map, but they kind of have these kind of like veins that are kind of coming out like this, right? So what we think of as like a mound actually has these ridges that come down. And this is like a prime example of that. So, and then we can kind of build this out, right? So if we lower down its opacity here a little bit, maybe do something like this, and so we get these smaller elements. And I think I'm going to go into my water over here, and I'm going to change this a little bit. I think I'm going to increase the, and again, I'm going to rotate this a little. I think I'm going to go the other direction, so it's more in line with my coastline here. We might even want to bring it down a little bit. And we can also, and here's one of the cool things that we can kind of do with this, because we're using these fill elements, is we can actually jump over into our effects layers, and I can grab the effects layers over here. And what I can actually do is create a mask from this. So it's going to be lined right up with all of the different elements. So you would only want to do this once you kind of jump into here and have all of your little islands and things all lined up. Oh yeah, I can add a river. We'll do that in just a moment here. So let's jump over into here, and then again, I'm going to use and adjust colors, right? And so if we wanted to make it brighter, and we'll blend this out a little bit, we can change that very easily, as you can see here. We can even make it like bright white. I think we'll do this. Or we can make it even darker. So total control over here. Maybe we'll make it a little bit more on the green side, and we'll just bring this down a little bit. Yeah, so something like this. That might work pretty well for us. Maybe we'll bring this down. Maybe what we'll do is we'll bring this here. Yeah, so play around with this and see what kind of works for you. And then if we bring this up a little, maybe something like that. Yeah. Great. Because I'm actually making it lighter. So you cannot do an adjustment on the color itself to make it. It's the way that the color is done inside of Fantasy Grounds. It's additive, so it's only going to add to the color itself. So if you use an adjust colors layer, you can make it much lighter, but you cannot in just adjusting the color itself, unless it's already very light, right? Then you wouldn't need to. But yeah. The other factor into that, Spencer, is that I I didn't make any sort of adjustments to the original layer besides size and whatnot. So adding to this would be pretty easy as well. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can make some rivers here. So we'll do that next as we kind of move on here. So one of the things that we can do to make a river is we can just paint it right on our water layer. So we turn our stroke off and we come down here. What I'll do is I'll actually use my sample settings, and I can grab that. You can see, here we have it. And I would be able to add it right to here. You see I have add selected. We have normal, add, and subtract. Now I could make another layer, especially if I want to interact with my lakes and rivers a little bit differently. So I could do it on a different layer altogether. I just want to make sure that it's all matched up, right? So it all kind of works well together. But even if I wanted on the same layer over here, right, I could do a normal new one, and then I could adjust all of those parameters individually as well. So all I would have to do is, let's say, go into my line tool, and on this layer, I'm just going to make a new painting layer just to keep things a little bit separately, just in case I want to delete it after I explain a couple of things and show you some stuff. But here, let's say we want to turn this into like a little bit of a river that's kind of coming down here. Now, one way I can do it is just drag this out. And here we go. We're just going to drag out this like meandering river here. And then I can kind of come back. And I'm just doing this all with my mouse. And now what I can do is I can go into the add functionality over here and maybe do some additional elements. Do like a little lake. I can come into here, and if I want to, I can move some of this stuff around and adjust these. I might even want to take some of these out, make this a little bit more. Let's delete that one. So we can interact with the system this way, and I can spend all kinds of time in there. And then I can come back into my adjust colors over here, and I can reveal area. And I might want to, I'm going to hold down Alt, and I might just want to add in a little bit of this. So we get a little bit of a transition in some of these areas as it kind of goes down and through there. And then on this layer, I can come back into my painting tab, and I might want to just make some isolated lakes or ponds or whatever. Any other questions about any of that stuff that I've done so far before we move on? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how you can build out some additional kind of elements like this. I'll just wait a moment just to make sure that there's no other questions, and then we'll do something similar. Great. So why don't we just move on then? So here we have something very similar in through here, right? Where we have these kind of elements. I would probably go back in and grab some of this stuff. You might even want to just like delete some of these and then make this a little bit more manageable on certain elements. We might even drag this out a little bit. Make this a little bit more natural looking. As we kind of move in here. Now, drawing all of these things out and going in and manipulate them could become a little bit tiresome, right? So now what we can do is let's go into, I'm going to grab this again. And go into my painting over here. I'm going to turn off my stroke and switch over to my fill element. And again, we're going to keep it just like this. And I can go back in and grab, I think it's, yeah, I'll just go to the, it's in the first coastal map pack. It's the water background, and I'm just going to grab and drop that right in here. So it's going to be the same. Now you can see it's the same thing, and I don't have to worry about any sort of color adjustments or anything along those lines. Okay, and so what I can do here is, let me just tighten this up a little bit, is I'm going to make a single little nice little river, right? And then I'm going to use that, and I kind of show you how you can build this stuff up here a little bit, right? So let's do, and we could even grab in something as a reference, but I think we're going to be okay with it for right now. And actually what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an ellipse tool. And I'm going to hold down shift, and because I want the start of it to be a little bit round, something like this. And now I'm going to switch to the add functionality. So I'm going to add to this, and I'm just going to start to draw out a nice little meandering shape here. And then begin to bring this back. This is going to require a lot of like adjustments here as we go, but so something like this, right? And now on this one, I'm actually gonna, I think we'll simplify this a little bit, right? So we can go here and then we can simplify selected, and we're gonna make this into a stamp tool. Bring this in, so it's something along these lines. Bring this out. We want to make sure that it feels a little bit more tapered. So that's pretty good there, right? And now I can go over into this area here. See, this is pretty big, and I want this to be quite a bit smaller. I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm just going to shrink this down to maybe something along that size, right? And we'll put it like right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my export functionality here. So here we go to export, and I'm going to export this as a PNG. And now let's go over here and do, I'm just going to call this river 1. And boom, that's been exported. Now I can come over into my assets, go into a campaign, refresh this. And now let's look for river. And here it is. Boom. So now what I'm actually going to do is I can take this and I can bring it into here. So let's go over into here and go to my stamp tool. Boom. And the reason why I want that little round part is now I can like overlay this. And let's maybe like flip it. And that's going to do the same thing. It seems that after we use our fill elements, the stamp tool is not quite happy with us. So we can do something like this. And we can still go back and forth and kind of manipulate this, but we can create some additional little elements like this. We might even want to put that one underneath. So maybe I'm going to come here and do this, create a new painting layer, drop it down here, go back to our stamp, stamp it like that. Might even make some smaller ones as well, right? And now we can export this one. So we can do like this, and then I'm going to call this one River 2. Boom. So now we have two different river elements, and if we go over here and refresh, here they are. Now we can close this one down, and here we're going to go back into this painting layer. Let's switch back over to our stamp tool, and we'll grab this guy, and you can see here it is. And now what I can do is I can just start to stamp this in, creating a lot more elements. I can even drop it down if I want to, so that it's kind of coming out from underneath this stuff. You can see how easily it blends in with all of this. I can grab this guy. Might even want to do something along these lines where you get like this kind of stuff. And we get some really cool kind of interaction. See how we've just created some different elements, and this is all above the ground. So whatever we do with the ground underneath is just going to work. And we can even grab this if we wanted to and build this off from maybe like, let's do this a bit smaller. Maybe we'll do like some stuff coming off of the ocean here. Okay, so to export, you see this right here, export image to file. If I export this, it's gonna bring up a pop-up. You're not gonna see it because I'm actually streaming just Fantasy Grounds itself, so you don't see that kind of happen. But you get an external window that pops up, and then you have the option of saving something as a JPEG, a PNG, or a WebP file. Right. So if you don't need any sort of transparency, you want to save it as a JPEG. If you do, you want to use it as a PNG or a WebP file. All right. Well, if there's no other questions about that, I'm just going to take a really short break, and I'll be back in just a few moments, and then we'll continue down. We're going to create some really cool kind of stuff here. There's a little bit of a issue here with our values, so we're going to have to fix that, but that should be pretty easy to do, and then we'll continue on. So if you guys want to hang out just for a minute, I will be right back. All right, we're back. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. And we're going to continue on this. First thing I'm going to do as we kind of progress here is make sure that there's a good contrast between our water elements and our ground elements. And right now, it's pretty close. Now, if you guys want a trick on how to understand the difference, so we have contrast, right? Which is how far something is to light and dark. There's also color contrast, but we're going to be talking about just that. And if you guys have a hard time seeing the difference here, right, because these are really close, go into your effects layer, create a new effects tab, and we're going to go down to grayscale. And now you can see how close the water is to the ground. It's very hard to see the difference when it's in grayscale. So anytime you're making a map, it's always a great idea to have one of these layers just to kind of test all of those things. Now, what we want to have is a pretty good separation between the two. And there's a couple of different ways we can do that. One is we can go back to our adjust layers and we can kind of, do that way. We can go into our painting tab, and we can go on a by layer basis and do some color adjustments there. And we can do lots and lots of different things. And so this will be the first thing that we kind of adjust here. So I'm going to turn that off right now. But you can see that there's a lot more vibrancy in the water, but it's still going to be hard to see the difference between some certain things here. So let's go down here, and I'm going to go into my painting tab, and we're going to go into our edit fill layer over here, because this is all fill, right? And so even if I grab this and move it around, I can still do that. And you can see these elements that we have on the exterior here, and it doesn't affect that at all, right? So we can adjust these around. We can kind of move this stuff back and forth and find areas that are going to really work for us. But what we can also do is change some of the colors here a little bit. And so, but remember, we can only make it darker, right? So if we want to make this lighter, we can with an adjust colors layer, but we're going to have to do that with an effects layer. So if I make this darker, you can see that it's going to throw this stuff out of whack. So it's probably not going to work really well for us. And we have to come up with, do we want our water to be darker than the land, or do we want the land to be darker? And is one of them in a pretty good position? And what we should do is go over and make something else darker. And this is where we start to play with those kind of ideas. And so what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to make another effects layer. And we can use that to kind of bounce back and forth and to see what we want to do. So what we'll do here, and we can do this because this is below everything else. If I make a new effects layer down here, I can come here and go to adjust colors. And now, as you can see here, and we're going to have to do it this way, but we can now kind of see here, do we want this to be, and this is going to do all of the stuff together, right? Because it might be a combination of both, right? We might want to do something like 54 here, and then go into this. If we turn this off, you can see it gets darker, but I kind of like the green elements to it. But we might want to bring this down, make this. And if we grab both of these, we can go into our tab over here, and we can darken on the tab itself, right? So we might want to bring this all down here. Yeah, maybe we'll do something along these lines. We'll do it like, let's make this a little bit more on the blue side, and that's pretty good. Now when we turn this back on, you can see we have great contrast between our water and our land. So we can get rid of this now. And we might even want to get rid of this. This isn't really doing too much for us anymore. So let's get rid of that one as well. It will add in some like waves and stuff, and that's going to break up some of that darkness. So we'll have some stuff that we can kind of play with here. But that's working a lot better for us. And even if we turn this off, we still have a much better contrast between the two. But I think we're going to keep that on over there. And we can turn on our player view. And if we want to keep this just inside of here, we can go to our effects tab and we can add a mask, right? And then we can just come right over here and select out our land to be something like this. And that's working a lot better for me. We'll just call this one Rivers. Great. Okay, so we can do this all with an effects layer, like I said, something along these lines, but we can also do this by painting in elements, right? So maybe we want to have some darker areas in through here. Like we like it here, we just want to have some that is around here. Well, we can do it a bunch of different ways, right? We could paint in some lighter kind of elements in through here, underneath where the water interacts with us. We can also, we could put this blur up, right? And we could hide area, and we could start to hide out some of these areas. And start to get a little bit of best of both worlds here. And that looks pretty good to me, especially if we're going to start to put in some like forests and some other stuff. So now we're going to create a new painting layer above our ground. We're going to use our ground for painting in all of these particular types of elements, but we're going to use this to maybe do like our forest elements and so on. So that should work pretty well for us. So let's go back into our regional map pack. And jump over here and go into our decorations. And here we have some like these kinds of elements. We have a whole bunch of different like forest kind of elements. These kind of amorphous like tree shapes from far away. We also have like these singular kind of mountains. And we have additional kind of mountain shapes as well as like elements for our map itself. We'll get into some of this stuff as we kind of progress here. We'll put some of these on our map in addition to this. And the reason why these are white is so that you can make them any color that you wish. As I said before, Fantasy Grounds, it's an additive color implementation. So what that means is that as you add the color to the base color of whatever image that you're using, unless it starts off as white, then you're always going to be running into only going darker, darker, darker. With the white image that kind of starts off that way, you can kind of jump into that and create anything that you really wish here. Great. So let's go into, maybe we'll grab some of these like tree kind of shapes. There's two different types here. There are some with and some without like line work to them. So I think we'll grab some of these. Again, we're going to go into our stamp tool over here, grab this guy, I'm going to lower down the opacity of this. And I'm just going to start to create some of these like textured elements over here. I think I'm going to put this above the adjust colors. Start to build some of this stuff up. We can even overlay on top of some of this like mountainous kind of areas. I probably would not like obscure it too much. But here, because all of our water is above, we can just like stamp like right up. But we might want to make some of this small and kind of come in through here, some smaller little patches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this stuff up a little, right? I always find that to be like super fun. Got lots of different shapes here. Let's grab like something like this. Ooh, excuse me, I sneezed there for a second. I had to mute myself before it was uncontrollable. And I can lower down this opacity as well, some in some of these areas. So basically what we're doing with the opacity is it's kind of like how dense is the vegetation in these areas, right? We can do some of this. Also, one of the cool things about this being on its own individual layer is I can come into here and adjust things as well on a layer basis, right? So if I decide that I want to make this a little bit darker, I could. You can see how if I make it too dark, it's going to start to obscure the image because of our contrast between the water and the land. And we don't want to, we want to always maintain that, right? So we would never want to go that dark with that. But what we might want to do, and you can see here, this is where it's going to be adjusted by the adjust colors. It's going to keep things lighter by where the water is. But what we could do is in here, right, we can also come in and adjust the opacity of the entire layer itself. And one of the good things about doing this on a layer basis, right, like a per layer basis, is that now we can add to it with a little bit more freedom because we don't have to worry about the adjustments as much on the individual stamp image itself because it's being taken care of all in the layer. I'm going to leave it as is for right now, but I am probably going to go back and make some adjustments on there. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down to my ground layer. I'm going to start to make some more interesting elements there, right? So I'm going to grab some of these, like these mountain chains and whatnot. So we'll go back into our stamp. And this is where I like to kind of like play back and forth with some of these elements here, right? So now we have some kind of like clear avenues in between some of these forested areas, like through here, right? So I can just kind of like stamp something like this, and I'm doing this on the ground level, so you still get some of that interaction from there. And then what I can do is switch back over to maybe something like this, and start to build off of this like main ridge. Now I'll lower down the opacity of it. I think I'll flip it. And we can go in and grab some of these other kind of elements as well. I think I'm going to grab, let's grab this single mountain as well. We'll put like a big single mountain maybe over here. And again, we can lower down the opacity of this, right? And kind of create some elements. Extending some of the ridges down. You might want to put something out here as well, like on one of these islands. I think we will go in. Let's go into our tree area over here and lower down the opacity of that entire layer a little bit. Yeah, maybe something like this. That looks pretty good to me. Let's make it an even like 150. Pretty cool. And now we can go in and I'm going to grab some of these other kind of elements here to take a little bit more control over the landscape. So let's go back into our ground level. I like this dark area down here, but up here, we're going to make this one a little bit less. See, we want these like elements. And then I can kind of come in here and neutralize some of some of the variations. You definitely want variety, but you don't want it to be over empowering, right? You don't want it to be so much variety in the texture itself that it becomes difficult to even know what's going on, right? You want some sort of consistency there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And I think we'll just do a little bit more of a fade down here into this like rocky zone. And we can also go in and put in some snow or some more deserty kind of areas as well. So yeah, we have total control over all of the different aspects here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually go in, let's go on to our, I'll do this on the rivers layer here. We're going to do like some water splashes and whatnot. So let's go up here. I'm just going to type in splash. I think I have a couple of different ones here, but I'm just going to grab this guy. Or maybe I'll grab one of the wave ones. So here we have those are some of the hand-drawn ones. I don't think I'm going to use those, but I do have some. We have animated waves as well that we could use. We also have, things like this. that we can put on our ocean to give it a little bit of movement if we want to. And these are like less of what I'm looking for. I think I'm going to use something more along the lines of the splash. Let's try and spell it correctly. And I have another little one like this. Maybe we'll actually use this one. Actually. And what I'll do is I'll turn off my aspect lock ratio, and I'm going to make this quite a bit longer, something like this. And I can lower down the opacity of this. Maybe we'll make it not quite that long. Yeah, maybe something like that. See how this is all kind of like jagged looking? So we can go back into here. I'm just going to fix that really quickly. So let's go over in here. And we'll adjust a couple of these things. And see, we can actually come in here if we wanted to, get right in here and start to build out like the shape of our rocks, or like that rocky. And now on the rivers tab, what I'm going to do is, because I want to do it on the rivers tab, is so I can kind of go around these shapes and whatnot. And keeping it at a pretty good angle to the shoreline here is what I want to do. And you can see as we zoom out here, we get a much more natural kind of flow here. We want to make sure that we do yeah, that looks really good. And what I would do is and as you can see, as we move out, that's going to feel better and better from this perspective. And what I would actually do is spend the time to kind of go down and around and help accentuate a lot of this stuff as we kind of progress there. What other elements do you guys think that we should be putting into our map here? I could literally just sit here for a long time doing this. But we'll move on in a second. I'm just going to do a little bit more of this kind of texturing, and then we'll get into some of the other stuff as well. You see, as we make this smaller, we can kind of get in here and do some of this like cooler, more detailed kind of stuff. Yeah, very cool. All right, so let's move on here. I'm gonna we'll go into here, and then we'll switch that to there, and then that'll alleviate that little bug for us for a minute. So you can see here how we can start to texture these things. We can do the same thing with our landscape. You can really put as much detail as you want into this. At the end, I'm going to be exporting this. Very cool. Let's see here. What we can do is let's add in some different kind of like texture stuff. We're going to go back into that regional art pack. We can also put in like regional borders and anything else that we kind of decide that might want to kind of do this with. But if we jump into here, like we have like symbols and whatnot, these are some very basic symbols, but there's an entire GM symbols map pack, which is great for putting together these kinds of things and locations and so on once you have your actual map itself. Let's create a new painting layer. So we're going to put this on top here. Going into our, we have a lot of these kinds of elements that we can kind of use here to give our map a little bit more of an official map kind of feel. So we have like these kind of things, like if you were going to create a little a map key, you could decorate it all up in lots of different ways here. But what we also have is some of these other kinds of decorations, you know, like these kind of like filigrees and whatnot, which we can add to our map as well. So let's say, for example, we were going to be putting in our little sea monster. So you can see it's originally in its white form. So what this means is we can make it any color we want to, and it will be as bright as we want it to be. Right, so if we wanted it to make it just like green, or we can make it black. Anything that we really want here is kind of within our grasp. We also can lower down its opacity. If we wanted to keep something along the lines of like being white or whatnot, we could totally do that. If we're going to be using it over here, we might want to make it like black, something like this. Or if we wanted to make it a little bit more on the brown side of things, or even gray. So you can really add some like cool kind of decorations to your maps as well. The same with like the ships and so on and so forth, and all of the other decorations and whatnot. But if we go into the effects, what we actually have here is like some nice textured elements. Now, these were originally created to kind of be layered over the entirety of an image, and it still can be done so. So what we can actually do is we would just like, probably the easiest way to do it is just to drag and drop it out here. Let's go into our layers tab over here and like do like a vignette. And as you can see here, here it is, kind of like, and so we can just kind of do something along these lines. Let's make it like here, and then just do that. What this is a fade from the edges. So you get like this darkness on the outside, kind of fades in, makes the area in the middle feel a little bit more as though that it is the center of attention here. We also have these cool kind of textures as well. And again, I guess we'll put this right in the middle here, and we can stretch this out. To add a lot of texture on the overlay. Now, something like this, if you drag and drop it out like this, the only way to control its color at this point is with the layers tab itself. And we're going to come in here and use the color picker here, and then we can change its color to whatever we wish. So if we wanted to make this black, for example, we certainly could. These are great for like doing like these kind of like textured overlays and whatnot. especially if you were trying to make it feel like it's more like a map itself. And these can be used in any sort of the art programs itself. So if we were to grab maybe something like this, you can see here, we could add a whole nother layer of texture to this. Now this is going to be really good. Well, that's actually, let's go back to this one. Let's drop it down in underneath our ocean. You can see here, using something like this could work really well to help separate some of these things here, right? So even if we turn off this adjust colors, we could drop it down in underneath this painting tab. And then we can come into here and we can just lower down its opacity maybe. So these were the ways that I used to solve a lot of these kinds of issues that we run into now, before we had a lot of these like effects layers and whatnot. But we can now delete that because this can now be exported super easily. And now we have a great kind of separation. And this is the type of solution that can be exported, right? We know that if we try to export an effects layer, it won't show up. And now using these in combination with each other, right? So what we can actually do is, if we go back up to this layer, and we drag out something like this, right? Probably something like this, and then so all of these begin to work in tandem with each other, and you can actually go in and do the same thing here, right? We could adjust this a little bit. And now we're starting to get a really cool looking map here, right? Like there's a lot more minor elements that would be kind of difficult to do on their own. But with some simple images, we can kind of throw this all together, right? We can start to do a lot of that kind of stuff that could be a little bit more tricky to create. You can see we can, as we were creating our little painted areas along our coast, and lots of fun stuff here. So you guys have any other questions about the regional kind of stuff? I'm going to go in and I got about 10 minutes left tonight. I'm going to be stopping at 5. So feel free to ask me any questions. I'm going to briefly go over like adding in some of these other elements as I was showing you before. I'm going to take this painted layer and I'm actually going to put it on top. And so if you guys have any questions, or if there's anything else that you'd like to know, or if you have any requests for anything in the future here, I'm actually going to make this, I'm going to do a little drop shadow thing with this one. So I'm going to do one like this, and then I'm going to move it slightly. Maybe we'll do it. Looks like it's a little bit embossed. We could even take it a step further too if we wanted to, because we could do maybe like that. And then we can come over here. we should probably do is do this on our, see, now it looks like a raised kind of embossed thing. What we can actually do is do that on the other thing, export it, and then bring it in as a single image. Yeah, no problem at all, Scott. I'm very happy to help. And we could do the same kind of stuff with some of the other elements, right? So if we were going to do, which in all honesty, the easiest way to do this would be, here, let me show you guys really quickly a little demonstration on some design stuff as we're kind of winding down here in the last few minutes. So let's take, for example, we'll create a new painting layer here. And the first thing we're going to do is do it in black, right? And so let's do this like here, maybe we're going to do this in black. And we're going to do all of these images. But we're going to do it in 3 different layers so we can move them independently of each other. So then we can grab this one, right? Make it whatever size we want to. And we're going to put this in our corner. And again, we're going to make this black. So we'll do it like here. Here. Okay, so I lied to you guys. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to do it one more time, but we should do this all on a layer. We got to color the layer itself. So let's do this here. We're going to make 3 copies of it to make this all look embossed, right? Sure. I think it should be like that. Doesn't really matter. I will grab this one, put this here, and then maybe we'll do one of these ships, right? Let's do this one. We'll do it like that big. Okay, so here's a neat little trick that you guys can do, and you can do that with this with any image. It's easiest to do this with white images, which is why I oftentimes try to make these white. But here what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this whole layer 3 times. Well, we're going to duplicate it twice. We want 3 total, right? So here we go, 1 and 2, right? And so the first one, we're going to come over here, and we're going to go into our Layers tab, and we're going to make it black. So we're going to move all of these down. Boom. This one we're going to leave white, and then this one we're going to make whatever color we want it to be. We might adjust that a little bit, but let's say, for example, we're going to make it like a parchmenty kind of brown, right? Maybe something like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into these individual elements over here, right? And you'll notice that if you move this, it's going to snap to the grid. And it's going to be the same if you use your arrow keys. But if you hold Control, you can actually move this a little bit at a time, 1 pixel. So we can kind of move in here. And we're going to make this into a little bit of a drop shadow. Right? So I'm just holding down Control and using my arrow keys. And then I'm going to go to the white one, and I'm going to go into the opposite direction and make it so that it's a little bit a highlight on the edge of that, right? And I did this on all of them all at the same time. So you can see that this, right, it's got a little bit of a shadow and a highlight, like it's embossed a little bit. And you can do that. It's a really easy, simple thing that you guys can do with pretty much any decorative image, and it's much easier, obviously, the lighter it is, because then you can really make it feel like that there is a highlight there. So it's great. It's something that you can do like with lettering. So if you have like static images for like letters. And you can always come back in and adjust these. So if I decided that I wanted the black to be a little bit in a different location, again, all I have to do is hold down Control and move this. So I might want to make it further out, or I might want to bring it in a little bit closer, or maybe a little bit more down to the bottom. I can even come in on this in the tint area over here and adjust its opacity if it's a little bit too, as you can see here. Neat little trick that you guys can do. And again, you can always come in and adjust the colors. So maybe we want to make this a little bit darker. And have it feel a little bit more like a natural kind of embossment of these like designs. Great. Last call for questions, guys, as we wind down here. We got about 2 more minutes. So if there's anything else that you guys, or if you have an idea for what you'd like to see on the next stream. One last thing before we go here, I'm going to go onto this painting layer down here. This is where we have all of our trees and whatnot. I'm going to create a new painting layer. In this art pack, we have all of these brushes. So we have like these like travel lines, right? So if you're going to mark out like areas or whatnot, and then we have borders for like regions and whatnot. So you can awesomely kind of create whatever you want. What you want to do is you want to take one of these and drop this right onto the stroke. And then you can make these any color you wish. So maybe we'll make this one, if we wanted to make it similar to, make it a little bit bigger here. Probably want to make it a little bit, like a color that's going to stand out a little bit more. And then as long as it's underneath our water, it's really easy to kind of draw out these sections. And I'll start it off like this, and then you can kind of draw this out. It's got a little bit wonky over here, but we can just come into here and, oh, I don't want to do that. And there you can start to draw out all of the borders of your places and so on. There's some just regular lines here, and you can always do this also without an image. You can just do this as a stroke as well. And if you wanted to do it as a stroke, you would just, pick whatever color you want, maybe something like this, and make it whatever size you want, and then draw out your regional borders. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for spending a couple of hours with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And if you guys ever do have any sort of questions or whatnot, feel free to pop in any Saturday. I'm usually here at 3 p.m. Eastern time. and we run for a couple hours. So depending on what we're doing and what's going on, sometimes I run till 6. So yeah, anything at all, please let me know. And I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.